Nobody who works full-time should be raising a family in poverty, a statement repeated by President Obama as he campaigns for a higher federal minimum wage. The U.S. economy is rebounding after the recession, but the rebound has helped a lot of top-wage earners while low-wage workers struggle with the increased cost of living. In San Francisco, the most expensive city in the U.S. for rent, low-wage workers have a hard time making ends meet, despite having the highest minimum wage in the U.S. since 2004. With the average rent topping $3,000 a month in the city, many people like Raimundo Gutierrez can't afford a room of their own. Raimundo shares a studio apartment with his 4 brothers. He makes $14 an hour at a job that's close to full-time and $15 at a second job part-time. He works 7 days a week and still struggles to pay for his $480 portion for rent and to provide for his wife and son, who soon be joining him from Mexico.
A veces uno no tiene tiempo ni para la familia, ni para los hijos, ¿no? A veces uno tiene hijos, pues a veces uno dice, no, pues hay que dedicarle 2 días a la familia. A veces no hay tiempo, pues la familia hasta se molesta por tanto trabajar, por si acá no, si no trabaja uno, la renta está caro, que tienes que comprar uso, que tienes que darle al niño para que vaya a la escuela, tienes que comprar libros, tienes que darle para su pasaje, a veces no alcanza ni el dinero. Uno viene así cansado.
San Francisco is increasingly a city of haves and have-nots. Out of 100 U.S. cities, San Francisco has the biggest growth in income disparity from 2007 to 2012, according to a Brookings Institution study released in February. San Francisco's minimum wage is at $10.74 an hour. If you're a minimum wage earner and you're renting a room for $1,000 a month, working full-time will mean you spend 60% of your pre-tax income on rent. So you're spending double what the federal government considers to be affordable, with very little left over for other expenses. The co-director of the workers' rights organization, Young Workers United, hears every day how hard it is for workers to live in the city making minimum wage.
A lot of these folks are juggling 2 or 3 jobs, and they're still making the minimum wage, still barely making enough to cover rent, childcare, and their groceries.
Industries that have a high concentration of minimum wage earners are restaurants and retail. Others, such as the banking industry, have some people who are paid well, but the janitor, the security guard, and the secretary are paid much less. San Francisco was one of the first cities to pass a local minimum wage law in 2003. Lee Yi-woo was one of the workers who fought for this increase. She was earning close to minimum wage in a restaurant and struggling to make ends meet for her and her family. At the time, she lived in a single-room occupancy hotel or SRO unit.
10年前呢，我呢就住喺一間散房，係好細嘅啫。咁我個仔呢係3歲，嗰陣時呢，我哋呢就係散房呢，就係公共廚房、公共廁所，啲環境呢好差嘅。咁都好多人攰住喺嗰度，所以咧成日呢煮飯嘅時間呢，又冇地方煮飯咯。 啲衞生又好差啦，所以嗰陣時真係一種好大嘅無形壓力喺嗰度。
Lily was given a raise through the minimum wage ordinance passed 10 years ago. She now has a union job that has afforded her and her husband a home in San Francisco. She continues to speak out for better labor standards for all workers. Since San Francisco raised the minimum wage in 2004, what's been the effect on the economy? The chair of the UC Berkeley Labor Center co-edited a recently published book, When Mandates Work, that studied the impacts of improvements in wages and benefits for workers in San Francisco since the 1990s.
San Francisco passed Prop L, the minimum wage, 10 years ago. A few years later, passed a healthcare spending requirement, paid sick leave. If we look what happened to employment in San Francisco during this period, compared to the surrounding counties, overall employment follows the exact same patterns. Goes up in good times, down in the recessions, comes back up. When we look at the lowest wage industries, restaurants being low wage industry with high labor share as part of their cost, San Francisco actually grew faster than the surrounding areas, about over 17, close to 18% in San Francisco compared to 13% in the surrounding Bay Area counties.
Ken says there was no overall negative effect on employment numbers when wages were increased in San Francisco. He says that raising the minimum wage can save businesses money in other areas.
You have lower turnover, people stay on the job longer, which saves the employer money in terms of hiring costs, training costs, recruitment costs. When people are paid better, you also have lower absenteeism, fewer grievances, higher productivity, better customer service.
Increasing the minimum wage has been made more popular through movements like Occupy and protests by fast food workers and Walmart employees. There's more highly educated people and older people who earn minimum wage, and the Great Recession took out many middle-income jobs. There's also a public cost to a low minimum wage.
And it turns out that over half of fast food workers in the United States, including people who work full-time, they and their family members are relying on public assistance to make ends meet because the wages are so low.
The battle for a minimum wage close to a living wage, or a wage that will better support people's living expenses, is being fought across the U.S. Nationally, President Obama is calling for an increase to $10.10 an hour. 7 states plus the District of Columbia have already raised their minimum wages, and others have proposals in the works. In the Bay Area, the city of Richmond has approved a plan to what could be the highest in the country by 2017 at $12.30 an hour. Moving the minimum wage higher in San Francisco has popular support. A recent David Binder research poll said that nearly 60% of likely voters in the city support a $15 minimum wage. Increasing the minimum wage can be achieved only by a ballot measure. Late last year, Mayor Lee announced that he wanted to seek an increase to San Francisco's minimum wage on this November's ballot. One thing he needs to contend with is the impact to the city budget. The city's budget will feel the pinch from wage increases for some city and nonprofit workers. So community and labor groups want to make sure there's no negative impacts to city contracts and services. In the meantime, labor and community organizations working together as the Coalition for a Fair Economy are drafting their own measure at $15 an hour and stronger provisions to make sure that new and existing wage laws are enforced. Despite a number of laws already on the books, wage theft, underpayment, and not complying with required health benefits are still daily occurrences. The coalition is proposing that large companies would have to increase wages more quickly than smaller businesses who'd be given a longer timeline for increases. Some small business owners have spoken out with concerns that their profit margins are too small to handle an increase in wages. They may be forced to lay off workers or implement a hiring freeze. To Ken, the economic argument for having higher standards for bigger companies is compelling.
For example, raising the minimum wage for Walmart across the United States to $12 an hour would affect their price structure by no more than 1%. It's minimal cost, easily absorbed by the company, and again, with a tremendous impact on the workers.
Carlos Preciado works at just above minimum wage for a large clothing chain.
It's really hard for me because I love the city. I would like to stay here, but I can that's why I'm living in Oakland. If the city of San Francisco increase the minimum wage, it's gonna benefit me a lot. Have extra money, not because I live check by check.
The minimum wage isn't all the community is working on. For example, groups want to prevent employers from reducing the number of hours employees are scheduled to work. Then there's proposals that tackle housing issues.
In order to address the problems in San Francisco, there needs to be a range of policies. Raise wages, address affordable housing, address evictions. You kind of have to tackle it across the board.
A functional economy depends on all types of workers. A higher minimum wage certainly helps to keep working class people living in the city.
咁我而家有時咁諗咯，如果我以前嘅生活咧，就係好似而家有啲人咁嘅生活咁樣啦，都係喺最低工資嗰度嘅條邊嗰度生活咯。我覺得而家嘅生活咧，係最低工資都好咧，都係好難生活咯。即係我做10年之後咧，而家咧就好開心好多啦，因為咧就穩定啲落嚟，啲工作要穩定啊，房屋要穩定啊，所以就人就開心啲。
This is Dyan Ruiz for People Power Media.